Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video, I would like to take a look at the potential gameplay loops falling under exploration in Star Citizen. Exploration is a big part of space games. After all, a lot of people are drawn to the great unknown in search of discoveries. And CIG has talked about quite a few exploration related features, and we also have many exploration focused ships. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here's a shout out to our amazing patrons and channel members for their support of the channel and everything else I do. Before we can talk about the future development of exploration gameplay, we need to understand that exploration ties into two big gameplay loops that are not in the game yet and that we haven't heard much about in a long time. I am talking about science and data running. CIG haven't really talked about science gameplay in a very long time. It's definitely not in the works and probably doesn't even have a design document yet, which is probably okay. Truth is that science as gameplay doesn't really work. You can't really create new technology and new scientific discoveries within the constraints of a game. So I think that science gameplay in Star Citizen is going to evolve away from how we see it in real life. And it will take on a much smaller role as a part of crafting rather than a separate gameplay loop. I think that science will eventually consist of researching blueprints and item upgrades, and extracting highly specialized materials from high-tier resources. So rather than using a refinery to create high-tier materials, you would be using a science station. CIG could actually use this to create a very niche role for science ships, especially the Reliant Sen could be an interesting choice as a small exploration and rare material refining ship. With science covered, let's shift to data running, which is another key aspect of exploration. Now, you might be asking, why is data running important for exploration? And the answer is very simple. Data running will give us the tools and mechanics surrounding generating, transporting, and selling data. Exploration naturally generates data, whether about locations, resources, or interesting finds. So, what could an early implementation of data running look like? In this case, I'm talking about the Tier 0 implementation that won't necessarily support data running as a gameplay loop, but would enable basic functions of exploration. I would do this by treating data as cargo, except that it requires a special kind of storage, which would be the ship's computer. Every ship would have some capacity for data depending on the size and type of the computer, with some ships like the MSR or Herald having increased capacity since they have dedicated storage servers. You would also have a new MFD screen that would allow you to manage the stored data, so you could choose to delete or retain the most recent scan results or delete files already stored to make more room. I would pair this with a Mobiglass app or a terminal that would allow you to transfer data to players or sell them to a broker. This would give us data running Tier 0, which would allow us to build scouting missions, which we will get to later. Another feature that would be needed for exploration would be the ability to create and share custom map markers. This feature was already announced and is being worked on. Combined with quantum boosting, it would give us the ability to go pretty much anywhere, even if there is no quantum beacon. Obviously, to make exploration more engaging, it would be nice to get some improvements with scanning. And maybe as a part of that, CIG could make scanning stations on ship have some new functionality. I talked more about radar and scanning in a separate video, so if you're interested in that, feel free to go watch that after this one. Now, let me take a brief pause to pay the bills. Most of you watching right now are not subscribed, so go on and click that button. Also, don't forget to check out the latest episode of the Comm Relay podcast and my community apps The Hauler and the Armory. Now let's get back to the video. We can actually dive right into exploration features. I generally like to think about exploration in 3 tiers: Interstellar, Planetary, and Local. Interstellar is the discovery and mapping of entire star systems and jump points between them. Planetary is exploring planets for resource deposits. And Local is exploring small sites like caves, crash sites, or alien structures. And actually, a big interstellar exploration feature was announced last year. We know that there are two types of jump points: permanent ones, which are visible on the star map and are used when plotting routes. And then we also have temporary ones, which can appear in random locations and are only available for a limited amount of time. These are obviously not in-game yet, but are announced and presumably in the works. But why are temporary jump points important? As we're seeing in 4.0, jump points have become a choke point. There is a high presence of security on the UEE side, and a high pirate and player presence on the pyro side. So the permanent jump point may not be the best route if you're trying to travel unnoticed. The other reason is that a temporary jump point might appear between systems that don't have a permanent connection. So for example between Stanton and Nix, or Terra and Castra. So you can see how knowing where such a jump point is and where it leads to might be valuable information, especially for smugglers or miners looking to avoid detection. But would you risk an unstable jump point to avoid pirate-infested routes? Let me know in the comments. This will likely be the first exploration loop added to the game. I think the first implementation will be very randomized. You will discover a jump point in a similar way to how we find minables right now. You are going to send out a scanner ping and see a return. When you go to investigate, you will get the option to activate the jump point. You can then save the location into your ship and sell it, or mark it and tell your friends or whoever needs it. Later on, when long-range scanning comes in as a part of quantum boosting, CIG could let us detect gravitational anomalies from further away, and maybe even introduce advantages to ships like the Karak that are specialized in scanning and exploring jump points. I could also see CIG bringing back the ICC missions by asking players to go check out the weird signal reading. Most of the time they find nothing. Sometimes they find loot, and rarely they find a jump point and get paid a lot. One of the big issues I see for interstellar exploration in Star Citizen is that most likely every star system available to us will be known and mapped. In contrast, in Elite Dangerous, if you start exploring further away from populated areas, you actually have a pretty good chance of being the first person to visit a star system or a planet. Maybe CIG will change their mind about this, or introduce some new mechanics for this. But for now, I don't think we will ever see truly new discoveries in Star Citizen, at least on a scale of entire star systems. But on a smaller scale, I think there is a lot of potential, which actually brings me to the next set of features I think we're going to see. A big part of exploration will be scouting for resource extraction sites, whether for mining or to build an outpost at. And I think CIG will allow us to do this in two ways. As a freeform gameplay, where as you fly around and scan, you can find and save locations of resource deposits, and either give that information to your friends or sell it to a broker. And obviously in that case the price of the data would be bound to the resources you find. But I also think that CIG might eventually introduce exploration missions, where a guild or other faction will pay you to scan a certain area and get paid a flat fee for doing so. And this might be an early way to gain reputation with guilds focused on exploration. And as a part of this, players will be able to discover points of interest for local exploration. And that would be players going into caves, ruins, or similar sites to collect samples and artifacts. Especially for historical sites and alien ruins, it would be interesting if CIG added some kind of a handheld scanning tool and allow us to give those scans to a museum. But that would be a very advanced gameplay loop, and if we see something like that, it's going to be far in the future. But I do have an idea for a fun feature that would make finding and exploring points of interest a bit more interesting. I would make points of interest move and change their layout. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense when I say it like that, so let me give you an example. Let's say that as you're flying around, you randomly find a cave. You explore it a bit and find that it has 3 chambers with some specific features. You scan and note the location. A few days later, you want to go check it out again because there were some minables. You go to the location you marked, but the cave isn't there. So you look around and find it a few kilometers away, but now it has 4 chambers and a lake inside. You are a bit confused, but you do your mining and mark the location. A few days later, you can't stop thinking about it, so you go again. And again, the cave is a few kilometers away from both locations. And there is now also a waterfall. As more players visit the cave, its location and layout stabilize, adding a sense of discovery and mapping progress. Now, you might be wondering why a static location like a cave would move. By subtly shifting its position between visits, we create an illusion of cartographic inaccuracy, reminiscent of early explorers charting the Earth. By introducing this feature, you achieve 2 things. You add an element of mystery to points of interest, and you create an incentive for a player to visit again, so they end up getting more gameplay out of a single location. And even if you're not the first person to visit, you have a chance to find something new. By now, we talked about the various features that could be introduced for exploration, but I think we need to address the big question. What will exploration look like in 1.0? You might have noticed that it didn't get as much of a spotlight during CitizenCon presentation as some of the other gameplay loops, and it was limited to pretty much just visiting new points of interest and biomes. This is not necessarily bad, but why is the 1.0 vision of exploration so cut down? Well, there could be a few reasons, but I think the main one is that CIG want to focus on a core group of gameplay loops for the 1.0 release. And they're going to place heavy focus on loops they can use as a part of the main story. The other reason is that exploration not only requires many supporting features, but it is also fairly open-ended, especially when players just roam the universe and happen to find something interesting. And I think that CIG want to keep it that way rather than trying to constrain it into a fully controlled gameplay loop. And finally, 1.0 will have 5 star systems. And CIG chose 5 systems that are well known and well mapped. So there won't be many things to discover, at least on an Interstellar scale. But I think that there will be a lot to find on a smaller scale. For example, Vandal outposts in Nyx or alien ruins on Terra. I think CIG will refine and enlarge their implementation of exploration from there. As more star systems are added after 1.0, CIG can start adding more of the unknown and undiscovered, and maybe eventually star systems beyond what we know is planned at the moment. And especially for an important gameplay loop like exploration, it's important for CIG to start small and figure out how to grow it bigger. So start with caves and ruins and then move on to planets and star systems. That way, I think they'll be able to achieve a better, more engaging experience for the player. And with that being said, that's all for today. What do you think? Will CIG introduce undiscovered star systems? How can they make small-scale exploration more interesting? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.